If selling your services makes you feel a little gross or even awkward, you're not alone. You've probably been taught and practicing a version of sales that frankly doesn't take people into account first. My guest today is Julie Jones. She's a sales expert and consultant and the creator of the psychologically safe sales method. Julie's core philosophy is that selling isn't about persuasion, it's about building trust. When you approach a sale as the start of a relationship instead of a transaction, people don't just buy, they become raving fans. As a speaker, consultant, and sales trainer, Julie works with service-based business owners to help them get out of their own way and build sales practices that actually feel good to use. Check out this conversation with Julie Jones. Welcome to Brand on the Rocks, the podcast that distills bold ideas into clear messages you can actually use. Each week, we serve up conversations, audits, and straight pours of insight to help you cut through the noise and grow your business. Hosted by brand strategist Ryan Holk, this is where clarity comes neat and your brand gets remembered. Well, Julie, welcome to Brand on the Rocks.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here with you, Ryan.
It is great to have you. Now, we met recently at The Thing in Nashville, and I sat through a session with you and heard you talk about some really cool things, both on stage, but also in kind of a breakout VIP day. And I realized in that moment, I think I need to have you on the show because you brought a fresh approach to what I see a lot of my clients struggling with and trying to figure out. So today I'd love to kind of dive into that. Are you good with that?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit, your heart in business is on the sales side of things and helping sales conversations. How did you end up in that? Most people I know didn't start there. They ended up there somehow. So tell me a little of your story.
Yeah, I never really even wanted to be talking about sales.
Wow.
It was not like the thing that I was really all that passionate about. And actually when I, way before I started my business, I was managing a chiropractic office and found myself in a sales position. And, way back then, I actually really hated being in a sales position. And all of the sales training that I was getting was phenomenal sales training. However, I found myself always kind of in this uncomfortable place with it where I felt like I kind of had to put on a new persona in order to be successful in sales. And I kind of had to change myself a little bit to be okay, now I'm sales Julie and not Julie, right?
Yeah.
And so fast forward to starting my own coaching business consulting, but starting my own business, I started to realize that so many of my clients were just struggling with the sales element of things. And on a whim one month, I was like, why don't I just do a 30-day sales training? All of my clients can come and we'll just help everybody get up to speed with sales, because this seems to be the roadblock that everybody is having. And in that month, everyone was like, you're really good at teaching this. And the way that you teach this is so different than the way that other people teach it. And I kind of realized in that experience that this is what people wanted to learn from me. And my business education was find a problem that people have and solve it. And I was like, well, this seems to be the problem everyone's having. And as that evolved, I started to get really passionate about teaching sales and talking about how you can, excel in sales without feeling like you have to be somebody you're not or change yourself to be, sales promotional, whatever. You know what I mean?
I do. And I feel that at a deep level. And I have sat through far too many sales experiences where I'm like, this doesn't feel like the person I talked to 5 minutes ago. So yeah. Tell me, why do you think that there's this internal switch that we feel like we have to flip when we move into sales?
Yeah, I think that there's so much social and cultural conditioning around what it means to be good at selling. And even, I have a 2-year-old. Well, no, he's not 2 anymore. A 3-year-old now who is a chatterbox. Like he's talking all the time. And everyone always says, that kid's going to be so great at sales. And I'm like, you know what? Selling is not talking. It's actually listening. And I think that's like one of the
Mm,
core kind of misconceptions about what it means to be really good at sales. It's not about talking, it's about actually being able to be a really good listener and connect with people. And so I think we as entrepreneurs and oftentimes service providers, we're very connection and relationship focused. And we think that we need to become a performer or more of a influencing personality type in order to be good at sales, which I don't agree with. I think that whatever your personality type is, I think there is a way for you to connect with people through the sales process
mm.
without having to change yourself.
I love that. I have a high value on the importance of building trust with the person you're speaking with, even before the sales process ever happens, just in terms of connecting with them, of sharing your story, of hearing from them. And that seems like such a natural transition to start thinking about your sales in that way.
Mhm.
And I know that you have a specific psychologically safe sales method that you've kind of built. Tell me kind of what that means exactly and how that plays into that tension that people are feeling.
Yeah. So when I started my business and I was having sales conversations with potential clients, I realized something was happening, and that was that I wasn't really getting objections anytime during the sales process. And the way I had been trained in sales in my previous sales experience was that I'd been trained to like be very good at answering objections
Mhm.
and helping people navigate through them. And as I started to be aware, I'm like, man, like nobody's giving me objections. Like, what is going on here? And I started to realize, okay, a lot of people are coming into my business as referrals, and they're coming here already having an awareness of what I do and how I can
Mm,
help them. And I credit that to having really good branding and positioning and messaging, right? But what I also realized was that I didn't really know, like, I didn't have a blueprint for how to have a sales conversation as a coach or a consultant. All I really knew was like, I knew that if I asked people really good open ended questions, then like I would stay in leadership of the conversation. And so that's what I just did naturally.
mhm,
And in that process, all of their obstacles or objections would kind of surface early on in the conversation. So then by the time I was asking for the sale or, telling them the price, we'd already had a conversation about those things in a very relaxed and easy way. And so I started to be like, how can I teach other people how to do
mm,
this? And like, what is actually going on? I'm kind of the type of person who like, I like to think about ideas a lot and, like, formalize and come up with frameworks and structures. And so I started to be like, "How do I turn this into something that other people could be doing?" And that's where I started to realize there's psychological safety that's being
ooh,
created in the conversation, and that's what's actually making it so that I'm not getting all of these objections because this person feels safe enough to tell me what's really going on, tell me what their concerns are early on in the conversation. So I really started to look at and learn a lot more about the psychology of creating safety in a
mhm.
relationship, and I know this term psychological safety is used a lot in like HR and corporate leadership and training. But I started to realize, oh, I'm creating psychological safety in the sales process. And nobody's really talking about that. And I think this is kind of like the most important thing?
Wow. That yes, I think you're onto something here. And it almost sounds to me like you backed yourself into this. And here's what I mean. I didn't set out to be a marketer. I didn't set out to be a storyteller. But what I found was I could get in front of people and I somehow innately drew people conversations out of people and stories out of people. And then it was like, holy cow, what am I doing? Because clients are like, why can't we get the same response when we sit in front of someone? And trying to figure out like now I'm back, I'm going backwards. Like, how do I reverse engineer this? And how do I and
Yes.
so I think that's fascinating for you to recognize this becomes a conversational thing. Because so many times I feel like I get on a sales call and it's a cut and dry. I know the front and the end, and I just need to get there. Uh, for the business owner who that is the pattern they're stuck in.
Mhm.
Like, I'm getting on the call, and if I don't get through my 5 things, what is something super practical on that call to help them begin to transition into that more conversational, trust building kind of approach?
Yeah, I think there are a few keys that everyone should implement right away in their sales process. And the first is has nothing to do with what you're saying at all, and it just has everything to do with the intention that you have coming into the conversation. And I think that it is to have the intention of coming in with curiosity and letting go of any sort of an agenda. So I think often people come into a
Mm,
sales interaction with an agenda. And in typical sales training, you're taught to basically identify the pain points and then like push on them
mhm,
so that that person like really feels motivated to solve the problem. And to me, that is kind of a like, we're projecting what we think a person should do onto them. And what I have found that psychologically, that doesn't feel safe for somebody. And so when they start to sense that this person has an agenda, their walls go up. And so they're not going to give you the whole story of what's really going on anyway. And so if you can come into a sales conversation really genuinely with curiosity around what's going on with this person, and I think really truly like, is this a good match? That's all I really think about going into a conversation is just like, you know, is this a good fit for them? And is it a good fit for me? And that's all we're here to establish. And I think that a sales interaction is successful if we leave with clarity, whether that's a yes or a no. That's the whole purpose. The only like failure to me in a sales conversation is if we leave confused.
mm,
If we leave with the I need to
yeah,
go think about it, if there's confusion, that's where I'm like, we didn't do our jobs.
interesting. Thinking about some horrific sales experiences that I've sat through and that there's no reason to get into them. But
Yes.
the interesting thing is, every one of them, I walked in knowing I was going to get pitched.
Yes.
And what I didn't know is, was it going to be a comfortable pitch that I could actually make a decision on, or was it going to be high pressure?
Exactly.
Knowing the person showing up to the sales call probably is feeling some level of that tension. What are you including in that conversation to make sure that you help diffuse that like low level angst that's happening in
Yes.
people where they're like, I'm going to get pitched. The only question is how much this is going to cost me.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, people can sense when you come in with an agenda. So
Hmm.
if that's out of the picture, then there's already a level of safety that's being established. And then I think when we open up the conversation, one thing that creates a ton of psychological safety for people is just certainty. So telling somebody exactly what's going to happen and then following exactly what you told them was going to happen. And what happens with that is that it not only creates certainty for them around what is this conversation going to look like, but it also creates like credibility when you actually do what you just told them you were going to do. So that right there creates a lot of trust. So that can just sound like, hey, Ryan, today what we're going to do is have a conversation about what's going on in your business. I'm going to ask you some questions. Is it okay if I ask you some questions? We want to ask permission.
Hmm.
I always say, a sales conversation is a lot like dating, and consent is, key here, right? So we want to make sure that this person is okay being in this conversation with us and that they've agreed to what we've laid out. And so, I will tell them here, I call this setting the frame, but basically, here's exactly what's going to happen today. How's that sound for you?
Mm.
So we give them certainty in what's going to happen. That relieves so much of that wall that they've put up of like, I need to protect myself. And like, is this a safe situation or not? They immediately take down the barrier. And then when we ask permission, that's like the second key. Then people, now they've invited you into that. Like we all have had that experience
Yeah.
of the person who knocks on your front door and like is like really aggressively trying to sell you something and you're like, I've already told them no 3 times, and you feel your nervous system go into that like fight or flight response. That's what happens when you say no and somebody doesn't respect that, right? And so I think there's so much safety that's created just in telling people what's going to happen and then asking permission to proceed, you know?
Proceed.
Yeah.
Wow. When you're in the midst of the conversation, do you go in with a mental idea? So the way I learned sales was similar to what you've already outlined, but you go in and here's the set of questions I have to get through. If I don't get through my 5 questions, and I got to have the zinger at the end. But so if you're going in with this sense of I need to be conversational, I need to be relational, I need to help break down the barriers that they might have, I actually have to ask great questions so I get great answers. How are you mentally preparing as the person giving the call?
Hmm.
Or where could this thing go? Like, are you kind of have this idea I've got lanes I could go down, or you're literally I don't are you literally free for all?
No, I have a structure. So I'm a big fan of having I have like a 10-step structure for a
Okay.
sales conversation. This is what I teach.
Yeah.
And it's basically like there is a purpose to each step along the way, but I'm
Mm,
going to change the questions that I'm asking depending on just like what I sense needs to happen with that person. But I do have kind of a framework for the questions. So, like opening it up, for example, we're just trying to get like in the first few questions, we're just trying to get a lay of the land. Like, what's going on with this person? Why are they here? Why'd they book this call? So
mhm,
that's like just gathering the facts. So I'm going to ask a lot of questions. For my industry, these are like maybe metric specific questions like, what are your current sales looking like? What's your conversion rate? Like, it's kind of, I think, of like surface level, right? Then from there, we start to see what's going on with this person. Then I kind of move into exploring the problem with them. So, in their words, what do they think the problem is? I'm going to ask lots of, really, my rule is ask open ended questions. Put a who, what, where, when, why, or how on the front of any question that makes it an open ended question. And I think that's one way that you can
yeah,
avoid trying to steer the conversation in a direction
yeah,
and instead just allow them to come up with their own answers internally. Because when somebody says something out loud for themselves and they hear themselves say out loud, this is my problem, they believe it. If I say, hey, Ryan, here's your problem, the skeptic comes online. So it's really, we're just trying to get them to say, voice their own answers because they'll believe their own answers. They're not going to necessarily believe what we're pitching to them. You have a thought about that, I can
I
see.
do,
Yeah.
I do, because this is where the coach consultant in me goes, because my natural tendency is to be a problem observer.
Yes.
There is one of the benefits or blessings of the work I do is I often can walk in a room and I can tell you where the problems are in a team. Be like, that person is a yes, that person's a no, that person you need to find an exit for.
Mhm.
Now, leaders don't always like that, but I walk in with that like a pointer thing. So I bring that into my sales calls where it's not just that I'm like trying to write sales copy that, proves that I know what their problem is. But
Yeah.
I'm like, I think your issue is this. Mm, I'm uh, I did it on at least 3 coaching calls in the last week and a half where I'm like, I'm going to tell you, I mean, based on what you told me, this is the problem. Does that sound right? And they're like, yeah, I think so. Well, that's an interesting way to approach it from just figure out a way to actually get them to say it.
And I think there is value, especially as a consultant, in that style of selling. And in what I teach, we do a little bit of that. We just kind of wait till the end to do
Yeah.
that, where it's like I really want them to think critically about their situation, what's going on for them first. And here's why, because if I come in right off the bat and I'm like, here's what your problem is. Some people want that, right? They're like, I don't know what
Yeah.
my
I
problem
don't
is. You
know.
just
Just
tell
tell
me
me.
what it
Yeah.
is, right? But I think if we come in too hot with that right
Mhm.
away, I think people tend to skew or tend to lean in the like skeptic direction of like, can I? Well, of course he's going to say that because this is what he does.
Right.
I've thought those same thoughts on a sales call before. So what I like to do is just have them explain their problem a little bit more. We talk about, why haven't they solved this problem? What are the obstacles that they might have standing in their way? We talk about what they want. Like, I really ask people a lot of questions,
Mm,
kind of painting their desired future. Or, like, one of my favorite questions is, if you could wave a magic wand and have this resolved over the next 3 months, like, what would that look like for you? Because I really want them to, you know, again, come up with their own thing. And then at the end of that, I can be like, okay, so it sounds like
mm.
you're saying this. And that, I think, is really key to, like, engage some active listening skills and mirror back to somebody what you just heard them say, because now they go, oh my gosh, Ryan's listening to me. Nobody has listened to me before. And I've had clients tell me, I hired you because you're the only person who actually listened to me. Everybody else just talked at me. So I think that bringing in the active listening before you make the pitch makes them actually available to hearing what you're going to say when you come in and
Mhm.
give them, here's what I'm noticing might be your problem.
Do you find when you lead with this approach and your essentially your intake process starts this way with very conversational, that it impacts then how the entire engagement runs with them?
Yes.
And in what ways have you like quantified that at all? Like you're like, oh, this saw a difference here. Maybe this is why.
Yeah. I looked at my revenue from 2025, and I realized that I think it was something like 83% of my revenue from the year came from existing clients. And I was like, man, my clients are coming in and they're buying every time I put a new product or new offer out, they're the ones who buy first. And I think that's because we have established trust in the
Mm,
relationship very early on, that they're like, yeah, if I'm going to get support in that, like, why would I work with anybody but Julie, right? She knows me, she listens to me, she sees me, she hears me. If she makes
mm,
a recommendation, I'm doing it. And I had this conversation with a friend the other day. She was telling me that she went to a chiropractor and they were recommending it was a very high pressure sales process for her, where they were selling a 6-month chiropractic care package, and she bought it because she felt like she had to in that moment. And I asked her at the end, of that engagement with them, did you stay working with this chiropractor? And she was like, no. And every time I went into the office, I felt like a little bit of resentment toward them, like I was trapped working with them. And I think that is a kind of a dramatic example, but I think that when you kind of erode trust in that initial sales process, like, you never get that back. And it costs you clients and it costs you referrals and it costs you your retention, basically, in the long run.
what I hear you alluding to is if you start with a sales process that feels icky for everybody involved, your client delivery is going to feel icky at some level too, or at least not. Boy, I've not thought of it that way, but that's such a fascinating connection between the two. Okay, for the person who is listening and going, I think you just painfully described a little bit of my process. Like there is something that is broken and I don't know what it is. When you start an engagement and you've had one of these calls that has been open ended and they say, hey, I think we want to work together. Where do you start if they recognize, hey, that's a tension I'm going to have to work on? Like, are there some specific things that you go to work at first? And if so, like where do you start that? Let's fix that process for people.
That's a really good question. I mean, if we're talking specifically about the sales conversation, and somebody is finding that, they're coming to me because their conversion rate just isn't great in the sales process, then I start by just doing like a full audit of their sales process. And so they're going to send me, like, I recommend that you always record your sales calls and you go back and listen to them, because you can learn so much about your tonality and how you show up on, in that interaction. But I'm going to start by just listening to them or their team in those sales conversations. And I'm going to start to pinpoint, okay, here's where we're giving away leadership. Here's where
Mm.
we're directing people a little too much, or I can sense, if your salesperson has some not so helpful sales beliefs, like if somebody feels like if they have a lot of money scarcity beliefs and they're trying to sell a $10,000 offer, that's going to be pretty clear in the words that they choose. And so at this point, I've listened to hundreds and hundreds of sales calls. And so I can pretty much dial in right away, like, okay, here's where these things are, going off the tracks a little bit. We'll start to dial those in. But sometimes, Ryan, it's also like maybe their offer is not clear. Maybe their pricing is not it's not a match for the market that they're trying to sell to. Like sometimes the issue is not necessarily the sales conversation itself, but it's somewhere in the sales pipeline.
And the place that I see it being broken, and I'm curious to see your side of this, is so the sales process, but do you ever walk in and recognize the sales process isn't the problem, the delivery of the product is?
Yeah, I think sometimes there's lots of issues.
Okay.
And they're
Okay.
all, like it's not always that the sales conversation is the problem. Sometimes it's that, they don't believe in what they're selling. I
Yeah.
see this often with, service providers, especially if
Mhm.
there's a little bit of imposter syndrome or,
Mm.
then there's an issue there. So sometimes it's in the mindset of the business owner. Sometimes it's in the delivery of the product or the service. Sometimes it's in the messaging and marketing. And sometimes it's in the delivery of the sales conversation itself.
So from the sales seat, since that's the role you're usually helping address, if you recognize one of those things, how are you helping the leader move past it or find a solution for that issue? If it's not maybe necessarily in the sales conversations itself.
Yeah. So, I like to stay in my lane.
Yeah. That
And
that's
so,
that's
yeah, if it's something where I'm like, you have like some serious messaging problems, like go talk to Ryan, I'm going to do that. Right. But often I find, this is maybe the case with more newer business owners. They just don't really understand how a sales system like works. And so I think often people feel the need to like convince people on a sales call just because they're not nurturing them enough in their content or in their
mm,
website or things like that. So when they get on the call, this person is basically a fresh human who has no context for why they're there or what they're doing. So sometimes we're looking at those things and
yeah.
like I have quite a bit of experience with copywriting and the other stuff too. So if I can help them, I will totally help them and work with those things. But if I feel like it's like this is a big project, I'll probably be referring to one of my friends.
It's a big project or there's red flags or
Yeah,
okay, so
yeah. I would say my
no,
jam is really like getting the sales conversation and the language dialed
mm,
in that part of the process, and then also looking at like what happens immediately after somebody buys, and yeah, we start going into kind of delivery zone.
I love that. And I also appreciate that you have clearly delineated this is my lane because so many in the marketing sales space have enough fluidity to what they do. They're like, well, I can help you get there. And I'm like, I'm not sure that you hired the right person to actually solve the problem you have. So it's always interesting for me to see how people approach that. So I'm curious. I talked to a business owner last week and a business that tends to be seasonal and dramatic sales happen in a 6 to 8 week period of time in the spring and the fall. And then there's another kind of medium ground sales time that kind of floats, and then there's 3 or 4 months where it's crickets. Like that's just how the sales cycle works in the business.
Hmm.
But they noticed this year that they didn't have a volume problem, they had a pricing discount problem.
Mm,
And so I'm curious, for how do you in your process take into account it's so easy as the business owner to just say, well, let's just discount the price a little bit, or let's
yeah.
just find a cheaper way to get people in the door. Or how are you bringing that part of the conversation into the work you're doing to help business leaders think about it differently?
I mean, I think when you know how to lead a sales conversation really well, you don't have to do that because somebody sees the value in working with you at whatever price
Mm,
point, right? And I cringe so hard. Like every time I see someone who I know or a past client or, you know, a fellow business owner start discounting like crazy and I know that they're in a
mm.
value in what they're doing, like they wouldn't have to do that. So I think that, I think that actually having the ability to lead somebody in a sales conversation kind of it removes that like having to put things on sale to create pressure for people to buy.
Yeah. So when you're working with a business owner who's reviewing their sales process and realizing maybe that's been an approach to like, let's just add discounts,
Mhm.
do you have a script or a statement or something to help them realize and firm up, I can say my pricing and not shrink back in the process?
Yeah, yes, that's definitely my goal, and I just created an app that, is called Bilingo, Buylingo, and it is basically like a GPT tool that you can go in and put your offer information in there, your market. You can actually, like, put your personality style in there, you could put your client's personality type in there, and it'll create like a custom sales script for you that it has like built-in objections, like how to actually say the words that I'm talking about here,
Yeah.
and it walks you through it. It generates questions through that 10-step framework that I was talking about. And what I'm finding in the clients that have been using this process is that they feel confident in what they're going to say because they have a script that actually feels like them and it doesn't feel like I have to like memorize this kind of high pressure or robotic sales script. And I've actually I've spent I'm such a nerd for this stuff. I've spent the last year like buying a lot of people's scripts and studying them and trying them out myself to see like what feels good and what doesn't feel good. And
Mm,
like, because there are a lot of these kind of like NLP tactics and questions that people build in there to like use the sales psychology to get their way. And I just think we don't have to do that. And I think that when you feel the freedom to just be in this very like conversational, relational sales process, like you can stand a lot more confidently in what you're saying because your brain isn't like, this is icky, or this is like not me, or there's not this like cognitive disconnect happening. So when you say, when you say the price, you can just say the price and stand behind it and trust that this person still wouldn't be sitting in front of you if they weren't interested because you've given them many opportunities to walk away, you know. So I think that is one big one.
okay.
Yeah.
You said something in one of your sessions at the thing that I have kept replaying over and over. And it had to do with the importance of silence in the conversation.
Mm.
How do you use silence in your sales process so that it's not manipulative, but it's actually helping the process?
Yeah, I mean, I think silence is so helpful in the sales process because you have to think like this person sitting across from you needs space
Mm,
to think about what you're asking them. And they also need to feel guided and at ease. And so when you're getting nervous maybe in a sales conversation or you're trying to be really persuasive, your tone is going to get louder. You're probably going to talk faster and their brain and nervous system are going to go, this isn't safe, like shut down, right? And so I think silence, I always say the person who asks the questions stays in control of the conversation. And so we want to be focused on always asking questions as the one leading the conversation. But then the person who answers first is also the one who is like not in control of the conversation. And so if you ask a question and then you immediately start talking after you ask the question, blah, 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 or you ask for the sale and then you can sense they're maybe not all in. And so you start coming in with, well, we could do this instead. You probably just cost yourself that sale. And so we want to create the space for the person to think. And the reason why I think most people shy away from creating enough white space in a conversation is because they feel uncomfortable. And I just think like, this isn't about you feeling comfortable. This is about your prospect getting clarity. And it's okay to feel uncomfortable in a sales process. Like practicing being in that discomfort is like one of the best things that you can do. I've said the price out loud and sat in silence for like 10 minutes before while somebody opened their banking app and figured out their stuff. And I just sat there like holding space for them to figure that out. And to me, that's a very kind thing to do for somebody, is to give them that space to get their thoughts centered,
Okay, I was going to ask you how long will you sit, and you just said because the ADHD in me is like at 10 seconds I feel like the world is collapsing.
Yes.
But you alluded to something there, and that is they're actually making an important decision for their business. It is, and I as the salesperson seldom think of it that, like, I know it is for them, but I'm not thinking of it in that way. I'm thinking that this is an important sale for me rather than how is it actually serving the person in front of me. And wow, 10 minutes. I'd have probably been dying, but
I was like, this is wildly uncomfortable. I was like, I don't know what to do. But really, like, I just think if you can think, lean back, like take a deep breath. And if you're regulating your own nervous system in that process, they feel that. And that feels really safe for them too. And it gives them permission to like actually think about what they want to do.
Yeah.
And then if they arrive at a yes from that place versus a place where you were pressuring or talking them into something, they go home and they feel really good about that decision. And they start telling everyone they know about how amazing Ryan was, right? Versus them going, I signed up. I think so many, like, especially I see this in the coaching industry and like, if you've ever gone to like Tony Robbins, Business Mastery, whatever, they get your nervous system like so dysregulated before they try to sell to you. And this is what most salespeople are doing, actually. And they do that on purpose because they want to get you into this impulsive, reactive sort of state where you're making a buying decision out of fear. And again, I just think that costs you so much in the long run with your reputation, with referrals, with retention. And like, if I have a client who can say yes from a like grounded, regulated space, like we are lifetime partners now, it's a difference in values, but like that matters a lot to me.
But you're selling with integrity, delivering with integrity, and continuing the relationship with the same integrity.
Yes.
And that people feel that even if this is their first true engagement with you, that's so powerful. Okay. So bringing this thing to a close for the listener who has a sales call tomorrow or in the next 2 days, and they're going, Julie brought some great things up. What are the top 1 or 2 things they need to have in the back of their head to walking into that sales call that you would just say, if nothing else, make sure you do these 1 or 2 things?
I think it is number one, the purpose of the sales conversation is to get somebody clarity. It is not to convince them to buy. And like, you cannot convince anybody to do something that they haven't convinced themselves that they want to do. So like, to just let go of the need to convince anybody to do anything or the pressure that you have to be convincing. When you let that go, there's so much freedom in that interaction that then comes in. It's just like, now we can just have fun and like focus on connection, focus on trust, focus on curiosity. I think that like the energy you bring into that conversation is 99% of the gig. And then I think from there, it is outline what's going to happen, give that person that psychological certainty of here's exactly what's going to happen. And you can actually do that before you get on a call with people. I do this in like my call to action, so I will tell people instead of, hey, book a call, like we can tell people, book a call. Here's exactly what's going to happen after you book a call or after you know, click the link in bio. You're going to get a Calendly link. I'm going to send you an email. We're going to set up a time. Here's what we're going to talk about. Like lay it all out for them. That creates so much certainty right up front. Do it again when you get on the call. Make sure you ask permission to ask them intimate questions, ask permission to sell to them, and let them know if at any point in time you realize this is not the right fit for you. It's totally fine for you to say so. Like, you're not going to hurt my feelings. That's the whole purpose of why we're here today. And like that statement alone will disarm any sort of like sales resistance that they may have. And now you can have a real conversation with somebody.
Wow. Okay.
That was like 5
no.
things.
As you were talking, all of a sudden I'm like, I feel like she just gave the TLDR like there in 30 seconds. That was fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned your new app product before,
Yes.
and I always like to point people to whatever resources available, but I think this is a really cool thing because I've seen you talking about it recently on your social channels. And then I saw that you posted in on your page or on one of the groups that we're both in about it today. So give me a really quick highlight of how to find it and
Yes.
what they can expect, when they engage with you about.
Yes. Yeah. So you can just go to bilingo.app or you can go to my website, juliejones.coach, and it's on my website. And when you it's $27. So like I really believe in making business tools accessible to people, which is what we're doing here. So when you buy the app, you also get a sales course that comes with it. So you're going to walk through this whole methodology, the 10-step process. Like I really tried to be mindful to make it fail proof. So you can really, if you want to just jump straight to using the app, plug in your business information, it'll generate a sales script for you and for the prospect that you're speaking to. You can customize it every single time you have a sales conversation for that person you're speaking to. For example, let's say you're a private chef. If you have a wedding package that's this, and you're speaking to the bride, it'll spit out a different script than if you're speaking to the groom, right? So it'll kind of tweak based on all the all the rules I've given it. And once you're in there, if you have somebody asking you objections, I think is such a cool tool to have actually like open if you're having sales conversations with somebody in the DMs or over email and they come back with an objection. Just plug it into the tool. It'll tell you exactly what to say and how to answer that objection. And you can just copy and paste it, download the script. Makes it very easy. And I put some kind of bonus sales training resources in there as well.
Okay. So first of all, for those of you who are listening, I have seen some of her scripts. I have seen what happens in the room when people read them and go, why haven't I made these kind of decisions on how I talk about my products before? So yes, it is worth your time. Check it out. But also what you just explained is so much cooler than what I understood from what you've been talking about. Partly because what I see so many of my clients struggle with is they get into these conversations and they have not mentally prepared for the fact that I need a little bit different version for the CFO than I do the CEO, than I do the person who's actually responsible for the task. And in your case, you're talking about like husband and wife for, in your example there or something, but that they're not going in ready to pivot on a dime, so to speak. And this is a tool that essentially helps you quickly reset. How should I explain to this person? So when you're making the sale, I can envision being on a call and going, they just said this, what do I do?
I'm like, you could literally have it open in the screen on the Zoom call and type in the little objection that they had and see what it helps you come up with, in real time.
In real time. Okay. So cool. I love that. Is there anything I have not asked that you would like to share before we kind of wrap things?
Let's see. I don't know. I think I think you asked some really good questions today, Ryan.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Julie, thank you so much for being here, for having this conversation. Great to hear a little more of your amazing wisdom today.
Thank you so much for having me.
For those of you listening, please take a moment, go to iTunes, like and follow the episodes. Check us out on Amazon and everywhere else that you find podcasts. Until next time, blessings.